at our northern border, which is the longest, 5,500 miles, it's the longest continuous border in the world. Now, it's not the same as the southwestern border. We don't have the triangle feeding up through there, but we do have an incredible number of people coming through that area. And they're not only bringing with them themselves and some others, they're also bringing drugs with them, and it's an incredible assault on the northern border. So my friend Ryan Zinke and I were talking one day about what should we be doing? How do you get people aware of the danger that's taking place, and how do you get them to start acting on it? And the thing is, you've got to form a caucus. You've got to get people who feel the same way you do. You've got to have people who say, you know what, enough's enough, and we need to take a good long look at this. And I mentioned it to Ms. Stefanik one time, and she said, you know what, it is a critical issue for us right now. And being from New York, she said, well, wait a minute. No, I said, no. It's critical. It's critical, especially the New England states, and looking at the number of deaths that have taken place. Well, today I'm joined, I think, with 9 or 10 of our colleagues. They all have the same concern, and that's protecting America. So one of my special friends is a special ops guy, and we're not allowed to say what these people did when they were serving our country, just that they were special ops. I have a cousin, John, who has told me, please, Mike, never say who I am, just say I'm a member of Special Ops. So when I met Mr. Zinke, he and I talked one day, I said, so you're a Special Ops guy. My cousin served too, and we discussed it a little bit. I never realized just how close the two of those were as far as knowing what it is that they protected. And it is us, the American people. Our borders are virtually unprotected. They are wide open. And at some point, somebody has to do to help the Customs Border Patrol and the Border Patrol. Just think they are unmanned, they're unfunded, and they're not equipped to do the job that we're asking them to do. But they come out every day to do that, to protect us. So we want to get attention to that. We want to have some action, and we want the public to know that we are paying attention to and we are looking to. So my colleagues join me today. I'd like to introduce Representative Ryan Zinke. And you can tell from his attire, he's from a cowboy state, where these guys have a tendency to protect their own very, very carefully. So, Mr. Zinke, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and all. You know, the northern border. Most recently, it was a balloon. Right, we watched a balloon penetrate the northern border, and that brought a lot of questions up. And from a naval special warfare and a military background, you're always vulnerable, and they hit you where you're not. They give you some expanse of the border. Montana itself, you drive across here, it's the same distance from here to Chicago plus 2 miles. That's how big Montana is. And when you go talk to the actual people that are manning the posts up there, morale is probably the worst we've ever seen it. They feel like their job satisfaction is in the toilet, quite frankly. And they have a lot of challenges. Because the northern border doesn't have the population, we understand that the preponderance of illegal drugs and trafficking is coming through the southern border. But on scale, there's enough fentanyl that came through Montana last year to kill 3.1 million people. That's 3 times the population of the great state of Montana. So there isn't any border state anymore because the southern border affects us. The northern border we are being assaulted because we don't have a border. And there are unique set of circumstances in Montana, like there are in California. You're not going to put a wall, for instance, up the middle of the Rio Grande, nor are you going to put a wall in Glacier National Park. But we can look at what the technology is that's being used in the southern border. We can benefit from lessons learned. We can actually go to the front line and talk to our Border Patrol agents that are there in the front line and take advice from those that know. And again, this is not just a Montana problem or northern problem. This is a national security problem, and the northern tier has our own set of challenges. So I thank your interest. I thank my colleagues, and there are many, many more, including my great colleague from the eastern side of Montana. But with that, let me introduce, we both came in together, and she's a star, Elise.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you so much. Well, I am so proud to be here as the chair of the House Republican Conference, but most importantly, as the representative for New York's 21st Congressional District. And let me tell you, every state is a border state, every district is a border district, every community across America is a border community. And I've raised this issue for 2 years, since Joe Biden's border crisis has been raging on the southern border. This has had a direct impact on the communities that I represent along the northern border in New York's 21st Congressional District. District. There have been forced, no-notice Border Patrol deployments over and over again to our southern border to try to address the surge of illegal crossings on our southern border. That has left the northern border without the personnel, without the Border Patrol that we need. In just the first 3 months of this fiscal year, illegal encounters in the Swanton sector, which includes 6 counties in my district, increased by over 800%. My office is in direct touch with numerous families along the northern border who are documenting illegals crossing their own properties. Today I had the opportunity to meet with local Border Patrol leaders and heard directly about transnational cartel activity along the northern border. This is something that people in my district would have never even dreamed would happen, and it's happening today because of Joe Biden's border crisis. And we know Joe Biden bears responsibility, and it took our local Border Patrol leadership calling for agents to voluntarily deploy to our northern border for the Biden administration to finally admit that they had a problem. Today, I led my colleagues in sending a letter to DHS Secretary Mayorkas calling on him to take immediate action and present his plan to secure our northern border. Our taxpayers, brave Border Patrol officers, and northern border communities should no longer have to bear the brunt of this crisis. I also want to thank my colleague from the southern border, Tony Gonzalez, who is here today. He has welcomed so many of our colleagues on congressional delegations to his district to see firsthand the border security crisis, something that Joe Biden and House Democrats want to continue ignoring. I am excited to have here today a constituent, a leader when it comes to standing up for Border Patrol officers, and I'm going to introduce him next. His name is Brandon Budlong. He is president of the NBPC, the Border Patrol Council, Buffalo Sector, Local 2724, so you can hear directly from our brave Border Patrol officers about the impact that this is having on their daily lives and their ability to do their job. Brandon, from New York's 21st Congressional District.
All right.
I want to thank Congressman Kelly and Zinke for inviting me to speak today. As Congresswoman Stefanik said, my name is Brandon Budlong. I'm the Buffalo Sector President of the National Border Patrol Council. The Council represents the interest of 16,500 agents in the field agents in the Border Patrol. I'm a 15-year veteran of the Border Patrol and have served on the northern border for over 7 years. I want to thank the nearly 30 members of Congress who have already agreed to join the Northern Border Security Caucus. I believe that their participation will not only heighten awareness to security issues along our northern border, but focus more resources towards addressing some of our unique challenges. Many Americans are not aware that we have only about 2,000 Border Patrol agents assigned to the northern border. Given our 24/7 nature of work, this leaves us with only about 450 agents on duty at any one time. The agents must cover a 5,500-mile land and water border that is well over twice the length of the border with Mexico. The northern border has some of the most rugged conditions you can imagine, and that does not make our work any easier. In addition to a lack of manpower, we lack many of the tools that I had when I was previously stationed in Laredo, Texas. For example, we have many agents who lack the ability to communicate with their counterparts, and that leaves their backup over an hour away at times. I want to tell you why northern border security is important. Last year, 107,000 individuals were denied entry into the United States from Canada. About 40,000 of these individuals were Canadians who were denied entry for a variety of reasons, including having a criminal record. The other 60,000 were not from Canada. They tried our country through the front door, a port of entry. After being denied, many of them will try to enter the United States illegally between the ports of entry, where we are spread razor thin. For those of you who are not aware, Canada has a more permissive visa system than we have in the U.S. Let me give you 2 examples. First, Mexican citizens can travel to Canada without a visa. Mexican citizens can land in Toronto and illegally cross into my sector in Buffalo in a couple of hours. They don't have to contend with fencing, aerostats, and drones like we have along the southern border. They can just cross either on land or even more easily by boat on Lakes Erie and Ontario, if the weather is good. Second, the U.S. requires tourists or students from non-visa waiver countries, such as China or India, to submit extensive documentation. This includes being interviewed at a U.S. consulate before obtaining a visa. The Canadians generally do not require an in-person interview with the applicant. As a result, there's a greater likelihood of fraud. Many of you might have heard the tragic case of the Patel family from India that froze to death while trying to cross our border illegally near Minnesota last January. The father, who was 38, applied to go to a college in Canada using fraudulent documents and took his wife and 2 children to Canada. They never intended on staying in Canada and attempted to enter the U.S. within 2 weeks of arriving. They reportedly paid transnational gangs $80,000 to get to the U.S. and lost their lives in the process. Last year, Canada processed over 4.8 million visa applications. This is for a country of 38 million people. In contrast, we processed 6.8 million visa applications, and we have a population of 330 million people. The vast majority of those visa applicants to Canada are good people who are visiting their family or on vacation. However, there are many that see entry into Canada as a gateway to the United States, given our more stringent visa standards. Canada is a sovereign country. They are free to determine who is eligible to enter their country, be granted asylum, or resettled as a refugee. They are also a partner, and I cannot say enough good things about our colleagues with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and the Canadian Border Services Agency. However, we need to be aware of the fact that Canada's choices impact the United States and our security. We need to be aware that human smuggling is being orchestrated by transnational gangs who are making hundreds of millions of dollars in the process. We need to understand that illegal immigration follows the path of least resistance, and for many, that is the northern border. Border Patrol is not properly resourced on our northern border, but I hope that work with this new caucus is the first step in correcting this. Thank you. Next is Representative Gonzalez. Thank you.
I want to thank Representative Kelly and Representative Zinke for their leadership in bringing this caucus together. As the member of the most southern state in the caucus, Texas 23rd District, which stretches from San Antonio to El Paso, 42% of the southern border. Oftentimes, there are more Border Patrol agents from the northern border in my sector than there are in their own areas. I'll give you an example. One of those examples is last Christmas I spent on the border, and I was in Del Rio, 7 a.m., and they were doing shift changeover. And one of the things that I asked was, how many of y'all are not from this area? Literally every hand went up. And I go, okay, where are you from? We're from Detroit. We're from New York. We're from all these different areas. They're all northern border areas. And I smile and I go, welcome to South Texas. Is this your first time here? They go, no, Tony, this is our 5th time here. So what does that do to a family? I spent 20 years in the military. I spent a lot of time gone. I know what war looks like. We are at war. Who are we at war with? We're at war with China. China is attacking us via fentanyl, and they're using our southern and northern border to do that. And who are the ones defending us? It's our Border Patrol agents. Whether it's the northern border or the southern border, our Border Patrol agents are the heroes that are helping keep this war at bay. And I want to thank them. I'm grateful to be part of this caucus. I'm grateful to my colleagues on the northern border as we unite together. Now I want to turn it over to, I think Ms. McClain. To our conference secretary, Lisa McClain.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank Representative Kelly and Representative Zinke, for leading this caucus and bringing attention to the crisis at the northern border. I represent Michigan, and we have a northern border crisis into Canada. I'm familiar with it, and much like you've heard earlier, it is affecting our northern border states, families, fentanyl, as well as a bunch of illegal activity crossing through our northern border. We've all heard about the southern border and the millions of migrants who have flooded into our countryside since Joe Biden actually just put out the welcome mat on day 1 of his presidency. But because of his disastrous policies and inability to secure our southern border, our northern border is at risk. And this is a problem. But let's look at why this is a problem. We have all heard about this throughout the press conferences, but it's worth reiterating. Migrant encounters at the northern border have tripled in the last 2 years. So migrant encounters have tripled, yet the amount of Border Patrol agents are reduced. Not a recipe for success. No matter what math you use. Since October of 22, we've seen 55,736 migrant encounters at the northern border. 55,000. That's nearly as many as in 2020 and 2021 combined. The Swanson sector has seen an increase of over 800% in just this 1 year. These numbers are outrageous and they cannot go unanswered. And that's why we are all here today, is to bring attention to this ongoing crisis. This caucus will work tirelessly to find solutions. Solutions being the operative word. But you can't fix a problem you first won't admit exists. So we're here today to say we do have a problem. And let's work together to fix it. I invite some of my Democratic colleagues and the Biden administration to join us in our efforts. We will gather facts and then act on those findings. And let me be clear, where the Biden administration has failed to secure our borders, we will pick up the pieces, put the security of this nation above partisan politics. And with that, I'm going to give it to...
You know what, Claudia is not here.
Claudia.
Kelly Armstrong.
My friend, Kelly Armstrong.
Well, thank you everybody for being here. Thanks to Rep. Zinke and Rep. Kelly for setting up this caucus. My constituents are frustrated. My friends and neighbors in Canada are frustrated. At the same time that this administration is doing everything they can to stifle legal economic activity, costing communities on both sides of the border billions of dollars. We've reduced hours of entry to get ag products to and from Canada. We're the only country in the state that in the world that requires a vaccine passport in order to get in and allow my Canadian neighbors to shop in North Dakota communities and vice versa. We continue to do as many things as possible to frustrate the legal economic activity. Try doing an infrastructure project that involves oil or natural gas across the Canadian border right now. This administration has absolutely said, put up the red stop sign. At the same time, apprehensions are up 856% on the northern border. Drug seizures are up 1,500%, and those are going to get worse. We look at encounters on the border, and any of us who have visited the southern border see people in backpacks and ragged, all of those different issues, but the sophistication of the criminal activity behind them, quite frankly, they're better funded, they have better technology, and they don't have any interest in human rights. They will continue, as the Border Patrol agent said, criminals are the path of least resistance. They are like water. They will find a place in which they can get as much of their illegal product into the United States as possible. So this is a problem that's only going to get worse. We should open the border to legal activity and do a lot better job of shutting it off to illegal activity. And with that, I will turn it over to Representative Rosendale.
I'd like to thank Representative Zinke and Representative Kelly, like everyone else, and all my colleagues out here today for pulling this together and helping us raise attention to this really, really important issue. Montana is the only state that borders more than 2 Canadian provinces. We border British Columbia, Alberta, and Saskatchewan for a total of 545 miles. We're talking nearly a third of the border that we're trying to protect on our northern side. Most of this is what a reasonable person would call unpatrolled or unsecured during the winter months. However, once the weather clears out, that leaves a vast territory that's protected by little more than a 4-wire fence just to keep the cattle in. We're talking about open frontier country. The number of aliens deemed inadmissible by the northern ports rose more than 300% between fiscal 21 and 22, and about 26,000 to 107,000. You've heard it from the Border Patrol. These are outrageous numbers, and while it pales in comparison to what they're experiencing on the southern border, it does have impact. The Swanton district and northern borders become so overrun that DHS plans to ask people to volunteer to go and process illegal immigrants at the northern border. To be clear, this section has seen an 800% increase in encounters and apprehensions, demonstrating that the cartels are continuing to adapt to the United States vulnerabilities. They have determined that there are some weak spots on that northern border, and it's getting easier to bring people through on the northern side and continue to bring their drugs and their illegal aliens in through that side. And to prove that out, I met with my state's Attorney General, Austin Knudsen, just last week, and let me give you the numbers for just Montana. 11,000 11% increase in fentanyl seizures in Montana since 2019. 11,000% increase. In 2022, the Rocky Mountain High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Task Force seized a total of 206,000 dosage units of fentanyl in Montana alone. Fentanyl-linked deaths confirmed, these are the actual confirmed deaths by the state crime lab, increased by 1,750% from 2017. In what year there were only 4 deaths. Who's to say how much of this comes from the north? We don't know. And how much is it from the south? But one thing is for absolutely sure. We must do everything that we have available to us to secure our nation's sovereignty. And this group of individuals here is going to make sure we continue to bring attention to this issue so we can do just that and hold the Biden administration responsible. Thank you so much for coming out, and I turn over now to Representative Langworthy. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Good job, man.
Thank you, Congressman Rosendale, for that introduction, and I'd like to thank our co-chairs, Kelly and Zinke, for leading us into this fight. The establishment of this Northern Border Caucus could not come at a more critical time. While all the attention of the illegal border crossings has been justifiably focused on our southern border, criminals and the cartels, they adapt and they get smart. They're one step ahead of us. Their business is booming under this administration. So why wouldn't they seek to expand? More than 1 million illegal immigrants have been smuggled across our southern border in just the first 4 months of this fiscal year. Over 800 pounds of fentanyl seized in the last 4 months. Who knows how much more has poured through that's going on to kill our citizens? Just 2.2 pounds is equitable to 500,000 lethal doses. We're putting out a broadcast to China, a bright beacon of light. They're making this deadly drug, and the cartels, they're getting rich off of it. That we're not a country of laws, that we don't enforce our laws, and they know it, and they know they can profit off of it, and they know we're vulnerable. You can come into our country and kill our citizens, and we'll do absolutely nothing. That's what this administration's message is to the cartel and to the Chinese. And I'm sick and tired of it, and I know my colleagues are as well. The southern border might feel like it's a long way from home where I live in Buffalo. But every state in this battle is a border state. In New York, whose leaders, they want to pound their chests and be so excited to be a sanctuary state, a sanctuary city, they're getting the wake-up call. They're crying for help, finally. The Democratic mayor of New York City, a city of over 9 million people, can't support the surge of migrants. Communities in my rural Western New York district, they're already struggling. They simply cannot afford this influx and the crime that comes with it. And this administration's response to the worst humanitarian crisis in our nation has been nothing short of an abomination. And as a member of the Oversight Committee, I've spoken directly with the Border Patrol agents. They're exhausted. They don't have the resources. They've pleaded for our government to get things under control, but those calls have fallen on deaf ears. And you didn't have to be a betting man to predict that this was all going to happen. With Border Patrol resources trying to put a tourniquet on a gushing crisis at the southern border, all eyes are pointing north. Illegal crossings, as my colleagues have laid out, are up 863%. Our Border Patrol has no additional staffing or resources to deal with this influx. And we're going to use this caucus to bring awareness and action to this very real vulnerability at our northern border. Border security is national security, and we must do whatever we can to ensure that the problem at our northern border does not balloon to the crisis happening to the south. A country with no borders is not a country. And I would now like to turn it over to someone who can sympathize with the bitter cold climates. But we wouldn't have it. Is Congressman Stauber here?
No,
so he did not make it. Okay. Who's next up? We'll turn it back to Representative Kelly to
Thank you.
close it up.
Thank you. Good job. Good job. First of all, Mr. Hector Garza is here, who's the National Vice President. So, Hector, do you want to say a few words?
Of course.
Okay.
Of course. Well, first of all, thank you, Congressman Kelly and Zinke, for this Northern Border Security Caucus. It's very, very important. I'm going to be very, very brief with you guys today. 1.2 million known gotaways for the U.S. Border Patrol. That means that in the past 2 years under the Biden administration, we've had 1.2 million known gotaways. Those are the gotaways that we know about. There's still left a whole bunch of unknown gotaways both at the southern border and at the northern border. We're very grateful for this caucus, and we hope that this brings the attention that it deserves. We're very grateful, and thank you for everything. Congressman Kelly, thank you so much.
Thank you, Hector. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Hector. Hey, listen, the one thing I want to ask all of you, because you listen to these numbers, you listen to the number of deaths, you listen to the fact that none of this has been addressed for over 2 years. It's almost like if we don't recognize it, it doesn't exist. My question is, where is the outrage? Where's the outrage, America? You watch your sons and daughters suffer under this? You watch our country under a siege? And if these folks have been wearing the uniform of a foreign army, do you think we would have acted on it? So I want to thank my colleagues for joining Mr. Zinke and I and saying, you know what? It's time to call it what it is. This is a disrespect for the American citizens. It is incredible to stand here today in the last day of February and going into March, the spring of the year. It's time for us to spring into action, and that is what these group of representatives have done. But not for ourselves, but for the constituents that we represent. So, Mr. Zinke, I think that if anybody has any questions, we'll try to take a few questions.
You know, there's a lot of areas that the Canadian government can work with us on processing, identifying threats. But right now, it seems like we're the ones that are free of border, and I think we can work together. You know, perhaps even a joint border on the front. But as it sits right now, their visa program, which is their right, is a lot more open than ours. And what we're seeing is people coming to Canada enough in numbers where the next step in the U.S. is even easier. So, well, work with us and put pressure, because this is not, you know, in Montana, the Canadians in Montana are a lot of them are one people. We have a lot of, you know, similar background, more independent, a little less government. But we would ask them to work with us on it, because it's a problem that affects both sides of the border. Drugs are drugs, whether they're in Edmonton or Lethbridge or Missoula. The same sequence is killing both of us.
The Canadians are seeing tens of thousands of people crossing legally as well by land in Canada from the United States. Are there joint policies that both countries can enact to make the border work better for prevent this?
Maybe Mr. Gonzalez.
Yeah.
Good.
I want to jump in here. This is Joe Biden's border crisis. I haven't heard a question about what Joe Biden needs to do. We need to have a strong border security plan. What's happening on the southern border impacts the entire United States and obviously has an impact on the northern border. So what the Biden administration needs to do is focus on border security and admit that we have a problem. That's part of the primary goals of this caucus, is to raise the awareness. We do have a bipartisan Northern Border Caucus broadly focused on economic, trade, and tourism issue, but the security issues are real on the northern border, and that's what we're focused on. But it's the Biden administration's failure that has caused this crisis on the southern and northern border. It is part of the discussion, and again, the bipartisan Northern Border Caucus is focused on economic commerce, trade, implementation of USMCA, and this is a small part of it, but this issue is so important, which is why I'm so supportive of Representatives Kelly and Zinke, that we're focused on the security aspect of it.
Before we go any further, Mr. Stauber, please, I'd appreciate your remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Kelly. Good afternoon. I'm Pete Stauber. I come from the 8th District in northern Minnesota. We share a long border with the country of Canada along Minnesota's northern border. It contains one of America's most unique geographical boundaries, the Northwest Angle. And just last week, I had an impromptu visit with our Customs and Border Protection agents serving in International Falls, Minnesota, to thank them for their service. I'm pleased that we now have a Northern Border Security Caucus to raise awareness of issues on our northern border. While significant time and attention is justifiably being focused on the crisis at our southern border due to the Biden administration's policies, we cannot neglect our northern border. We must take our northern border security seriously. I've heard from folks locally about the increase in drug trafficking across the border. If you exclude marijuana, drug smuggling has increased 596% along the border since FY21. This affects all of our communities. Just this month, over 45,000 fentanyl pills were seized at a traffic stop in southern Minnesota. Our country is suffering from a long overdose crisis, and one of the first steps in combating this problem is securing our borders, including our northern border. Northern border land encounters have also skyrocketed over this past year. Already short-staffed, CBP agents in Minnesota are being ordered to sit at their desks to help virtually process illegal immigrants at our southern border, leaving more than 500 miles of border wide open in my state. The cartels know this and are beginning to market the northern border as an alternative. Just last year, a resort owner in my district found illegal immigrants using the chain of lakes at our northern border to sneak into the country. Our porous borders are dangerous to the families, and victims falling to the cartels with the fentanyl use. All of our borders need to be secured. It's an honor to be part of this caucus, and I'm eager for the forum we will have to shed light on issues at our northern border. I will now turn it back over to Co-Chair Kelly and Co-Chair Zinke. Thank you.
At this time, I'm going to introduce Claudia Tenney from New York 24 for a few remarks. Claudia.
Thank you so much. Good morning. Claudia Tenney. I represent the new New York 24 Congressional District, which runs along New York's northern border. Honored to be the voice in Congress for counties like Niagara, Wayne, Oswego, Orleans, Jefferson, who are being directly impacted by our crisis at the northern border. We're here this morning to bring attention to the crisis at the border, and I thank Mr. Garza and Mr. Budlong, who represent the Buffalo sector, which includes my district's share of our northern border. Thank you again for being here today. I also want to thank Representatives Mike Kelly and Ryan Zinke for their tremendous work in creating this important caucus. While the crisis on our southern border has received a great deal of attention over the last few months, our northern border is also facing an emergency and has actually for many years. And finally, the Biden administration has done nothing. And under the Biden administration, the northern border illegal crossings have increased 15 times, and drug smuggling over the border has skyrocketed by over 600%. The smuggling of dangerous and illegal drugs, including fentanyl, methamphetamines, and ecstasy, is killing our family, friends, and neighbors in our northern border communities, yet the Biden administration refuses to act. While the national security threat at our northern border continues to rise, U.S. Border Patrol is at the same level as fiscal year 2009. The Biden administration and Congress need to act immediately to give Border Patrol the resources needed to secure our northern border and to protect our communities. As a direct result of President Biden and Secretary Mayorkas' failure to secure our border, thousands of Americans have died through either crime or drugs smuggled over border. This action has cost American lives. I also implore my Democratic colleagues to work with us to advance common sense policies that will protect our communities while our northern border communities are in the front line of the crisis. They are not the only communities affected by this national security threat. And I just want to say thank you to all my colleagues here, Congressman Nick Langworthy, who also borders me in upstate New York, and the work he's done on this issue as well. And we need to get serious about this. We have a lot of complicated things going on at the northern border with Canada, and also with some of our Native American reservations, which are actually state reservations, not under federal jurisdiction. So we'll be highlighting these and touring through the northern border with my colleague, also Elise Stefanik from the North Country, and all of my colleagues across the northern border. And I just want to say thank you again to them. It's a real honor to be part of this caucus, much needed caucus, and I look forward to making sure we can keep our communities safe and protect our border in the north as well. Thank you so much.
We ran out of time, but Mr. Garza and Mr. Budlong will stay and answer questions once you've got
A couple members will stay and answer questions if you have it, but thanks for coming. I agree. There's a lot we can do together. This is a bipartisan issue and it affects us all. So I'm glad to be with this group and the talent behind me, especially the young talent. It makes me feel old, but I tell you, our country's in good shape when we got new talent coming in. That's much better than the old guard.
Sure. Well, no, let's not get carried away on that. Anyways, Mr. Budlong and Mr. Xer, we're going to stay, and they'll answer any questions you have. I just want to take a moment to thank Quinn Ritchie from our staff. We started talking about this months ago, and the longer we talked about it, the more he said, you know what, why doesn't somebody do something about it? And then I think we turned around and looked in the mirror and said, why not us? Why not us? So I'm asking the American people, look in the mirror. If things are not the way you think they should be, try to figure out why you're not involved in it. I don't understand it. People all want to stand back and expect somebody else to do it. This is an outrage, and for us to allow it to go forward is a sin on our part. So thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. All my colleagues, thank you so much. It's a critical issue. We'll continue to work on it. We're not walking away from it. Thank you for being here today to shed some light on what's going on in our northern border, which has been totally ignored. But Mr. Garza and Mr. Budlong will stay and answer some questions off to the side. Unfortunately, this piece of ground is in demand for quite a few things, and I guess somebody else is going to move us out and say, it's our turn, so move. Thank you all for being here. God bless you, and God bless America.